The idea was to have an open dialogue on what we are all doing in this space, which is something that we are all very passionate about, around crafts and all the forms that it takes, and what it means to us, what we can do for it, and some bits of learnings from all our individual spaces towards where it is going. So, where it's going is actually highly contested, and I'm expecting a lot of conversation around it because everybody has an idea of what can be done. And craft, especially, we have fewer people on board, but whoever is on board is very passionate about it, and it's more heart than mine, and that makes a very different kind of conversation compared to what happens on a tech platform, what happens in so many other areas where mind takes over. It's much simpler to align things. Here we have a pretty diverse point of view, but at the same time, I think need of the hour is to get those point of views aligned and see if we can establish some common frameworks under which we can refer to everything that we are doing. So this, what is culture code, is the space of culture code actually started appearing for us literally during COVID, when there was plentiful of time, and we could look back and see where we are going, but also see what was emerging and where things were going. And then ChatGPT happened, and that kind of just shook. Because before that, we were thinking machine learning is the way for us to try and integrate and bring in more craft-related knowledge in everybody's domain. But with ChatGPT, and then since then, it's been just a cascading burst of softwares, releases, tools. You can practically now turn anything into anything with barely any knowledge required, other than language, which has now become like the center stage of everything that's happening. So a big chunk of what culture code conversation is about is relooking everything which we were till before this time. We were looking like all our mentors, my mentor or mentors, and everything that we have learned was more about vocation, skill, and patronage, which were the key foundations of craft. Um, but with AI, a lot of this has shifted, and we are at a stage where creation by itself is only requiring language. All the skill sets which were traditionally part of the creative process are taken over by these tools. So I start with languages, as um, the fact that there is a variety of languages, and while we all converse and that's the only way humans communicate most effectively, there are only finite characters in every language, and yet these languages have allowed us to communicate for millenniums. Our thoughts, wishes, every part of our emotion is codified into language. So I thought it's a very good example to take and build a case uh, for developing a similar approach for crafts. So above here, what you can see are alphabets. We all know these alphabets. And below is a mid-journey simulation of certain keywords. So the first one here is paisley flower in Turkish style. Right? The next one is in Kashmiri embroidery style. Then it's Renaissance and Persian. And this is what Midjourney understood from the same prompt. I mean, it's actually referred on top of my personalized stylization, so it's got a common color code because of that. But then rest of it is its interpretation. And we see that there is a language embedded within a tool, whatever that is, whether we agree to it or not. But by changing one word, it is changing the pattern, and hence there is a weight to Turkish or Kashmiri or Renaissance in it. And what does that mean for us is the conversation. If we are all going to be creating and working just like the last maybe 20 years was Google, and everything built on Google's keywords, search, images, internet browsing, searching of internet data, and that informed almost everybody about knowledge. Going forward, there's going to be a different way of learning. And while Google was populated by internet, these tools are not populated by internet purely. They've got a kind of logic process of their own, and that logic process is what we have been trying to understand. What is that logic process? And if we can get inside that logic process and also create new wires that we want to connect. So beginning with this is an idea about what is culture, and it's a very diagrammatic thing, but also just in enormous landscape that actual culture covers when we refer to it, and any single craft form is actually built with the whole combination of all of these coming together. So it's a very, very complex relationship that is established. Complex for us to comprehend, complex, I think extremely complex for us to teach humans, but it is actually not that complicated to teach a machine. So with the training data that has to go into machine, we can actually deal with enormous amounts of complexity. As long as it is structured, it's not a problem. Unstructured complexity, of course, will give you unstructured results, and that will be of very little use to anyone. And this example coming from a very recent, I don't know if people know, but there's been a $1 million award from Tamil Nadu government for deciphering Indus Valley script. No idea why it is what it is, but it is a challenge. And when I looked at it, I thought it was a fascinating, context. When you look at the language, and just the fact that Indus Valley language, moment I attach the word language to this pictographic representation, which could very well be craft from any place, a place, but moment I attach it to be a language, everything that I read about it has a very different connotation compared to when we read about a bandhani or we read about any of the craft line. So crafts are seen as art forms or representations of artistic endeavors. They are not seen as languages. And therein lies, that's a little part that we are trying to open up and see what is the language inside a craft. Is there a language inside a craft? Or it is just a personal, attention to something that they want to create? Is it an artistic endeavor, or it is an organized representation through alphabets, characters, and motifs and forms? And the more we look at our crafts, there is definitely, anybody who's practicing this already knows there are constituents in it. There is certain traditional methods and ways of building things which are deeply entrenched in each of the regions. When we were working on for the parliament, we did this exercise, for the government of trying to figure pan-India story. That was the idea. Now, at one level, it looked very challenging because there is very little of a pan-India story. But when you actually start looking at stories, everybody has a flower, everybody has some animals, everybody has some people, there are some leaves, there is organic way of structuring things, there is inorganic, like graphical way of structuring things. There are stories to be told, and there are motifs to be represented, and then every art form, every culture, every region or time has represented them in their own ways. And that pretty much becomes a vocabulary of a particular school of thought. So this was an example that adds up to that, where you have different storytelling formats, telling stories in their own particular technique and styles, but they're all telling stories. And can this be considered a language or not? So as a fundamental question that we can come back, when we do our dialogues, that what difference does it make if we convert craft practices and techniques into a linguistic form and start approaching it as a creative tool to decipher what we are trying to say? to express what we are trying to say, and artisans become creators of these transmissions, also the owners of these transmissions. And then we start respecting or communicating with them with that kind of context building thing where they are helping us tell our stories. And these are all around us. I mean, from every form that is we've been surrounded with, architecture to textiles to objects, everything that's around us is encoded with this information. Unfortunately, it's been our feeling that over the last, especially last 100 odd years, we have lost the understanding capabilities to understand the meaning behind them. We know what they look like, and as we are progressing more and more around this space, we are forgetting what they meant. And most of the decision making around crafts is now pictorial, visual. I like it, I don't like it. This is what appeals to me, this is what I'm feeling good about today, and so I'm going to do this, rather than going deeper into the context building space where a particular flower was used for a particular purpose, a particular border technique was used for a particular purpose. Things were put together next to each other for a particular purpose. And what this would do to us is an example here. We'll just break this into few threads so that it is very clear what we are trying to say. This is one simple example which could be applied to multiple craft forms. 20 colors, 200 motifs, and 10 material textures, right? It could be textile with different kinds of base materials that it's put in. 20 colors could be natural dyes, could be any kind of colors, and 200 motifs is a very simple number for any craft technique to look at. Could give us this kind of combination. This is, I'm now talking from a computer science point of view, from a machine training point of view. It can give me 200,000 potential combinations in one motif alone. And then if my composition has 50 motifs in it, I already am in an exponential space. I'm in the same space as English languages or Hindi is. And that is a level of creativity every single craft form has within it, if we were to look at it from a very different viewpoint. And this is the machine viewpoint, where the potential can change completely. Another example of more specifically looking at it is the simple Phad painting, a very small one at that. If you take a bigger one, no chart will, be able to do justice to it, but a very simple one, it has analog, patterning to it. The story is not going in an organic fashion. It could be traveling in any direction that the author chooses to make it travel. There are key actors in it, there are surrounding actors in it, there is a screenplay to it. There's a specific hierarchy of framing, border, texture, color code that is embedded. All of this together is communicating a set of information. Just like a manga would do, just like any other story, film, etc. would do, it's just told in a particular language. And that language makes it different and unique compared to other tools. Then there are more charts which probably, we have printed this stuff and put it out, but we'll also share it online. That is further breaking down this idea of language structure and pairing it next to a craft structure, and see what are the commonalities, what are the toolkits that we get: vocabulary, grammar, expression. And if we break this out and create the same set of equations for our craft techniques, say Bagru block printing or embroidery, what is the vocabulary? What is the vocabulary? What are the different varieties of pattern systems that are there in it? What is the grammar of putting? What can go next to what? And what is the composition or the words that it creates? What is the meaning that it communicates? And then the final expression is coming together of all of that together. What is the meaning that we are trying to communicate? So that kind of a compositional approach could change the way we build with our crafts, we design with our crafts, and we might be able to bring back the meaning beyond graphic, beyond patterns, beyond style, the narrative texture, which was the original reason why crafts were created, because somebody wanted to say something and they wanted to say it in a particular way, which was contextual, highly contextual to their context where they were in, with the materials that were available to them. And that thing practiced over hundreds of years, thousands of years, became what it became. So to take that forward, we did an example. There are two examples I'm sharing. We've done quite a few to just test this hypothesis whether it works. This is an example with Kharad weaving done for somebody in Bombay. Broadway Mylan is the design firm who had a new office in Bombay, and they wanted to work with crafts. They were just passionate about the idea that we want to do something with crafts in our office, and they also wanted to work with local story, which is Dadar. So they were based in Dadar. They wanted to talk about Dadar. I said that's an interesting challenge to have. Now, what is Dadar, and how does any craft form which is not from Dadar relate to Dadar? So there are numerous stories in the past where, Persian artist has designed for Jaipur Darbar. Right? What is the Persian? So it's a similar kind of briefing where you want to tell a story and you want to tell it in a particular style. So we found out the right artist, spoke to him, Tej, and he shared a bunch of his images with us of the carpets that he was currently, what kind of work he does. These are the images of it. And through these images, we deciphered what all we want to take up. We created a structured plan of how this grammar will be built, which is analyzing these images and figuring out the core story, matching that with Dadar's story. What is Dadar? So Dadar is about the beach, it's about the Shivaji Park, it's got the ocean in front of it, it's got this fishermen, old fisherman colony, it's got high-rise buildings coming up, all in its back. So together it became a story. And then this was taken into Midjourney, wherein the images on the top right, if you see, are the images of the Kharad weavers' actual work, and over maybe hundreds of prompts. But we went through this entire process of evolving. It started with something as basic as that, and kept on moving, and that's where we finally landed, which is an image of Dadar done in Kharad style, as far as simple AI speak is there. But it's picked up everything that is inside this motif, unedited, has the same textural quality, design elements, what we would call the grammar of Kharad. And this pattern, as it is, was sent to the maker, and within 30 days, the maker was able to weave this into a carpet. On the top right is the vector image of the artwork that is here on that, and we just sent him a 1:1 printout of this, and he was able to do it with hardly any questions in between, other than first fear that I've never done so many colors, it's too complicated, we don't do this complicated. But when he saw 1:1 print and he looked closely to every single pattern in this print, he realized there's nothing here that he cannot do or is not from his repertoire of things that he does. But it is way more complicated than what he has ever done. And we did not approach to this project as designers or experts of Kharad weaving. I had not personally directly designed a carpet before, or anybody in my team had done it before. We didn't even meet Tej. It was phone, WhatsApp, actually, that did all the work. But we were able to communicate, and this piece could be created with an entire, so on the top right is the story of Maxim Bay mosaic is what it's called now. And it's the story of Dadar, and anybody who looks at it can see Dadar in it. And that's the beauty of craft, what he was able to achieve, what we were able to achieve, and what his historical data, when used as grammar and vocabulary, was able to do using a tool which was able to analyze that data. So I felt it was a positive example of what can be done. A second example we did was with Badoi. So it's also not one-off situation. This is to actually prove that, because typically it always becomes, oh, it happened once, but it will not. So this is Badoi, and Badoi again trained in the same way. The idea is now, this is looking at the Mahim Bay and Bandra and Dadar together. So another viewpoint, a much larger carpet. Same story. You first research about Badoi, take out all the text. Now, if I went directly to Midjourney, I did those tests, I've saved all of them. If I went directly to Midjourney and said, do design in Badoi something, it knows nothing about it. Has no clue what Kharad is, what Badoi is, These keywords have not been indexed on internet enough that it is part of their training data. So it means nothing. So you have to first train it. So we have to first, put in a lot of text data, distill that text data, pull out the key points, put that in, then put out the craft style, and then this comes out finally at the end of it. Now this is a image generation on Midjourney done in Badoy style. It has got all the textural quality of a carpet that Badoy maker can directly made, and he made it as it is. On the bottom right is actually the image of the carpet in detail. He was able to make the whole thing with zero problems, no addition, no modification, no color change, nothing from our side. Because in the briefing, 6 colors were also put in, the whole key ideas were already part of the brief. So the end product was a working document that a craftsman could work with. Now, of course, in these 2 cases, the craftsman was not the creator. So I understand that very well. This was seeing it from a designer's point of view who wants to work with crafts. So what is the value add? The value add is the story that we created. And a story with the knowledge that a craftsman has limitations was an understanding part of my education. That you can't just ask for anything. If I would have in the render said, make a photorealistic view of Mahim Bay and then just send that to the artisan, he will not be able to make it. We know that very well. So we had those knowledge. With that knowledge, we were able to put in the right filters and create that brief. Now imagine a reverse scenario, which is something I put together now here, where you have blocks of Bagru. The craftsman has maybe 300 blocks. It's a 3rd generation craftsman. They have 300 blocks that they have with them, and we scan the 300 blocks. With the 300 blocks, more than 40 million combinations can be created of colors and patterns. So there's a vast language that can be built. Now we build a custom GPT for the Bagru craftsman. It could be named on the person in his personal capacity, private GPT of his. All he has to do is give the login to this to any designer who wants to work with him or any client who wants to work with him. And when they generate images out of his custom GPT, everything that comes out will be usable directly to manufacture, because it will be in the language that he speaks. And it will make the entire process of creation so much easier and so much more exciting for the end user. And we can go back to telling stories rather than getting caught up in the nitty-gritties of understanding each craft in detail. In that process anyways, people are hugely limited by what they can understand. They can only understand 5, 10, 15 crafts at the most. And that then limits you to the area of your engagement for a very long time. Through these kind of processes, we could open up the artisan side. We could also open up the designer side and the consumer, the end user side of how they can use. Also, what's happening simultaneously, multiple things are happening. If artisans start getting into this space, or institutions like yours gets into this space, codify the craft, make it structured and easy to understand, that one can then create freely within that framework, we will create a cultural DNA for a particular craft. There is a method to do it. The same intangible, tangible methods can be applied. A carefully articulated DNA is built, which becomes the code base, and then it starts training with more and more data from people, so that this kind of issue does not happen. Right now, this is where we are. Pretty looking pictures. On there is an actual Koftagari inlay picture, and on left is from yesterday. Because these things change very fast, so you have to be sure that it is still relevant, and that's Koftagari as per Midjourney right now, which is an embossing outcome rather than an inlay outcome. So it's already completely different. Now it looks stunning. It looks so finished that most people will not be able to tell the difference if you were not to tell them that this is the difference. And if they are younger minds or people who have not researched enough about the subject, they will take that as the final outcome and they will start calling that Koftagari. So there is a problem that is currently existing. What I spoke about earlier is a solution that can be created. And that's something that requires, of course, a lot of work on everybody's part. And that is what I thought, if we align um, thought processes across India or beyond, to make sure that we all focus on creating a cohesive language, just like English and Tamil and all these languages have been created. The craft communities can create their own languages. All the tools are now literally open source. They do not require a lot of investment, financially. They do require a lot of time investment. And these are some examples that as we are now breaking down the problem into parts, there is a lot of global attention to this subject, but very little I could find on that front about India, and also realize that the problem of India is very different from rest of the world. We are probably the biggest leaders in this space as far as the communities are concerned and saving our cultural heritage is concerned, but we are far back in actually supporting them with the right kind of technological tools, because we have become highly commercial or end result driven entities, and these things do not give results immediately, they give over a period of time. So it requires certain kind of long term play to be put into it. But there are very good examples of other places who have built beautiful products, which could be community centric or just pattern recognition driven, imaging technology driven. And then there are questions like this one, which probably at least people here would all Jaipur people would know of. These kind of goof ups happen. I mean, some of them get called off, thankfully, because there is a GI to it and there is a logical framework in which one could ask this question. But this stuff has been happening for 200 years, right? Most of the time, we are not even able to call them out that it was copied and it was misappropriated or mislabeled and misused. But I think if we put enough data of our own out there, instead of holding it behind the gate, these questions will become very obvious and people will be very careful before they misuse that word, because they know what it means and they know that everybody else also knows what it means. It's not that easy to actually take it and use it easily. So that's the like the crux of it, is to create a code which is then covered with a tech-enabled layer and has then a digital ecosystem built on it. This gets more complicated, so this would be for the share. We can read it afterwards. It's like an open paper. Everybody can use it, and would be great if you give feedback, add to it, be a part of it. But there are layers in which we can grow, starting from digital innovation, creating this core documentation, creating a marketplace, which a lot of it exists. I think if moment we create a core documentation, it will be very easy for marketplaces to attach themselves to the core documentation. And then the third part is, which needs a lot of work, is the value chain innovation. How do we make, so from blockchains to all modern technologies, how do you embed that into crafts so that the actual ownership of craft goes to the artisan communities or to the museums or to the people who are actually spending a lot of their time and energy in preserving these methods, rather than the end consumers or the manufacturers who are using these technologies. So that breakup has to be very carefully articulated, and through the technology block we can actually do it. But it's not by closing our gates. I'm saying a contrarian thing. It's about opening them so wide that everybody can see it, and hence they will not mistake us for somebody else. So yeah, that's the short of it.